Thomas Wellesby Clark will always be remembered.
Thank you, Senator McCarthy. The time for this 2-minute statements has expired. We'll now move to question time, and I'm calling Senator Hume.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. The Treasurer has stated that the government is acting with some urgency in relation to the soaring cost of gas prices. Minister, will you bring about an end to the uncertainty of the government's policy on gas prices by the end of this sitting fortnight?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister.
Oh my goodness.
Senator Watt. Senator Watt, I've got the minister on her feet.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Hume for the question, even though I'm a little bit surprised at the way it was framed. Will we end the uncertainty? We ended the uncertainty with the election of an Albanese government. We ended a decade of uncertainty, a decade of energy policy uncertainty. How many times did you try and land a policy? 22 and counting, and didn't land any of them. Didn't land any of them. No, you didn't. You didn't. And everywhere we went, the private sector were saying, can you provide certainty? We want investment certainty. We want to understand the approach that government policy will take so that we can make investment decisions. And Senator Hume asks me about the uncertainty. I'll tell you what we've done. In fact, since coming to government, Minister Bowen left the swearing-in ceremony to deal with the fact that the lights were going to go out. Exactly. The swearing-in ceremony. We then uncovered a 20% increase in the price of electricity that Mr Angus Taylor had covered up, had taken the unprecedented step of covering up and hiding before the election so that it didn't become an election issue, because guess what? You were told that electricity prices were going to go up and you weren't honest with the Australian people. What we have done is put in the budget the information we have about the increase in energy prices, and what the Australian people have is a government that's working hard to look at what options are available for us to deal with it.
Senator Gallagher,
President, point of order. Senator Hume.
Senator Birmingham, just a moment, please. I'll wait until there's silence from those on my right. Senator Birmingham.
Point of order on the question of direct relevance. Senator Hume's question was quite specific to the matters of intervention in the gas market and quoted the Treasurer as saying the government would act with some urgency on that. Senator Hume purely asked whether the government would clarify its position by the end of this sitting fortnight. I asked you to draw the minister, who's had ample opportunity to traverse a whole range of other energy policy questions, to the specific direct question that was asked.
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Senator Wong, on the same point.
Thank you. On the point of order, I'd refer you to some of the rulings of Senator Ryan, who made the point that opposition members or senators should not be surprised if there's a political statement in the opening of the question if the response to the question is somewhat wider. The senator chose to frame her question in terms of certainty or lack thereof. I put it to you, President, that consistent with past rulings, the minister is entitled to pick up the issue of certainty, which she is doing.
Senator Wong, there was a preamble to the question, and it did deal with urgency, and I believe that the minister is being relevant. To the question of direct relevance, because there's a preamble there, I think the minister is entitled to canvass both the preamble and the specific question.
President, can I ask you to review the Hansard of that question? The only preamble related to quoting the Treasurer, and then the question, it wasn't a preamble, the question off the back of the Treasurer's statement around urgency went to uncertainty in the gas prices and the gas market. I invite you to look. It was a very tightly worded question, President.
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Senator Wong.
Certainly.
There was a preamble to the question, however it's phrased. there was, and the minister is entitled to go there, but I will review the Hansard, but my ruling remains. Minister, you've got 22 seconds.
Second thing we did was deal with the lack of supply, the supply shortfall that we were advised by the ACCC. And what we're doing now is to sensibly work through options to deal with ensuring we get reasonable prices into the market. That's what the government is doing right now.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hume, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. Earlier today, the Treasurer told journalists, "We have made it very clear that we are interested in a temporary, meaningful, responsible, sensible intervention in the energy market." Minister, why is it that the government, who couldn't make up their mind pre-budget, they couldn't make up their mind before the sittings this week, now can't commit to doing so before the parliament rises for this year?
Before I call the minister, I'll remind senators that the person asking the question has the right to be heard in silence, as does the minister. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. And in terms of what this government is doing, we're keeping the lights on, we're addressing the supply shortfall. Now we're looking at options around price. Yep. After 9 years of delay, neglect and disorderly kind of conduct across there because no one could agree on what to do, we are cleaning it up. In fact, in terms of power, we had 4 gigawatts of dispatchable power exit under your watch and only 1 gigawatt come in. So we're dealing with all of these issues. In 6 months, we have done more, much more, than you did in your 3 terms in office. And we are working hard to resolve it. We are explaining, and the Treasurer there couldn't have put it better myself in terms of the language he used. It is complex. If there was a silver bullet, don't you think someone would have deployed it by now? We are working through the options sensibly and meaningfully in a temporary way, as was explained during the estimates hearing.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hume, second supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. Minister, the government's budget actually cut policies and programs designed to increase Australia's future gas supply, and at the same time it abandoned its promise to reduce electricity prices by $275. Isn't it a fact that only gas market policies that have actually been announced by the Albanese government are making a difficult situation worse and not better?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister.
Thank you, Madam President. We're doing exactly what we said we'd do. Where we have cut programs, it was because perhaps there wasn't a business case, there wasn't information about what was going to happen with that money. There were decisions that were taken but hadn't been funded. We're cleaning up your mess again there. In terms of passing the climate legislation, we have done that. We're doing exactly what we said we'd do. We're implementing Powering Australia, and the simple fact of the matter is renewable energy is the cheapest form of energy. So if we can get more renewable energy into the grid through our Powering Australia plan, then that will put downward pressure on prices. That is, we are doing exactly what we said we'd do. And in terms of these short-term pressures caused by the war in Ukraine and the neglect of the last 9 years, we are working through options that will provide some relief to manufacturers, businesses and households where we can, and working with states and territories on that.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Sheldon.
My question is to the Minister for Emergency Management, Senator Watt. On Friday last week, I travelled to Forbes and Eugara and saw firsthand the utter devastation caused by last week's flooding events. Minister, can you please provide an update on the recent floods across the country and what the Albanese government is doing to support impacted communities?
Thank you, Senator Sheldon. Minister.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Sheldon. I recognise and thank you for your commitment to flood-affected communities, particularly as the government's Special Envoy for Disaster Recovery. In Australia right now, there are currently around 200 local government areas which are disaster declared and receiving state and federal support. Many of those are in New South Wales, where 75 local government areas have experienced severe flooding. That's around 60% of all the council areas in New South Wales. These floods bring real tragedy, and our thoughts are with the family and friends of the 10 people who have lost their lives in New South Wales and Victoria to date. These floods are deadly, and they are, in many areas, repeated. These floods have a real human cost and people are hurting. Senator Sheldon, I know that you visited Central West New South Wales last week, as did the Deputy Prime Minister, and we've all heard devastating and inspiring stories of resilience and survival. Yesterday, I met with locals in Eugowra, where homes were literally washed down the road and house roofs came to rest on cars, among much other damage. I spoke with Snow, who pulled 12 people out of floodwaters to safety, and Kim, who was rescued from her roof by helicopter. I heard stories of neighbours checking on one another and helping with the clean-up. Understandably, the people I met with are deeply affected by these traumatic experiences, and I know they have the support of this entire chamber. I know other communities are going through similar horrors. While in Rochester, in Victoria, just over a week ago, I saw the damage from heavy rains on the local school. I've seen similar damage on homes, crops and businesses in Echuca, Moree, Forbes and Parkes just since Parliament last sat. I want to commend the heroic work we're seeing from local communities and from local SES, police and fire services. The federal government is currently deploying 200 ADF personnel in central New South Wales as we speak, and it's been terrific to see support from our international friends in New Zealand and Singapore as well. Everyone is supporting these communities
Senator
right
Watt.
now.
The time has expired. Senator Sheldon, first supplementary.
Minister, I'm aware over the past month you have visited communities across Tasmania, Victoria and South Australia, which are out of the immediate disaster and are now entering the long-term recovery. Minister, we know that flood recovery will take months, if not years, and these communities will be reliant on our support. What financial assistance is currently available for flood-impacted communities?
Minister.
Thanks again, Senator Sheldon. This severe weather is very widespread, with disaster declarations for the September-October floods and storms now in effect in New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, Tasmania and Queensland. As I mentioned earlier, in Australia there are currently around 200 local government areas which are disaster declared and receiving state and federal support. This includes a combination of support for individuals, financial help for councils and homeowners for clean-up and repairs of roads, bridges and other infrastructure, supports for primary producers, assistance for small businesses and hardship grants for non-profit groups. Currently, we're delivering support that will help communities' immediate needs as we continue to assess the longer-term supports that will be necessary to help towns recover and rebuild. The Albanese government continues to work very closely with state governments and councils to make sure that appropriate support is getting where it's needed. I'm very pleased to see such bipartisan spirit, and I acknowledge the contact I've had from Senator Davey in her shadow role, along with other members of the
Senator
National
Sheldon,
Party.
second supplementary.
While I was in Western New South Wales, many community members raised the state of the roads and the concerns about getting produce in and out of flood-impacted areas. What support is the Albanese government providing to help fix the roads in these communities?
Minister.
Thanks, Senator Sheldon. We understand that road repairs are a major concern for a lot of regions who have experienced flooding. Roads are the arteries of regional Australia, and we need to try to keep them open as quickly as we can. Support for road repairs is currently available in New South Wales, Tasmania and Victoria through the disaster recovery funding arrangements, which are jointly funded by the federal and state governments. These funds provide immediate help for states and councils to repair roads, footpaths, bridges, tunnels, flood levees and stormwater infrastructure. And the National Emergency Management Agency and Resilience New South Wales will be meeting with councils in New South Wales this week to help them with information about what kind of support is available. I'm very conscious that these floods are not just happening in New South Wales. They've been happening in a number of other states, and our friends in South Australia are watching with concern about what might be coming down the Murray River shortly. And that support will continue to be in place for every state and every community to repair the roads and infrastructure that we're seeing destroyed. We are standing with these communities, and we will continue to do that for as long as is necessary.
Thank you, Senator Watt. Senator Cash.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Minister, what modelling has been undertaken by Treasury into by how much workplace productivity and real wages will increase as a result of the government's industrial relations legislation?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I thank Senator Cash for the question. Well, as the senator would know, Treasury does a range of detailed modelling on the economy, and all of that is presented in the budget. It's updated regularly to factor in changing economic conditions as well as policy decisions over time. The legislation, we went through this at estimates. the legislation that this chamber will hopefully debate before the end of the year hasn't been settled yet. You know, the modelling that the Treasury has done and the forecasts on wages, assumptions, etc., are all part, have not taken into consideration the Secure Jobs Better Pay Bill because it hasn't been settled.
Senator Cash, first supplementary.
By approximately how much will real wages increase as a result of the government's industrial relations changes?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, the government has made no secret about the fact that we want to get wages moving again after almost a decade of stagnant wages. We wanted to see wages grow in a responsible way. We're seeing some early signs of that with the wage price index that was, I think, released last week, which had wages increasing to 3.1%. But you can see the wage forecasts, the wage price index forecasts that are factored into the budget in one of the budget books, and that has wages growing at 3.75% in 22-23, 3.75% in 23-24, and in 24-25 at 3.25%.
Senator Cash, second supplementary.
Minister, given your government's budget papers show real wages are declining and productivity is decreasing, when will Australians and which Australians will see an increase in their real wages?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister Gallagher.
Well, again, if I can just go through the record of what happened under the previous government. Well,
Order.
There's some context that should be. I know it's an uncomfortable truth. I know it's an uncomfortable truth about what happened to wages because it was a deliberate design feature of your economic architecture to keep wages low. We are dealing with an inflation challenge at the moment, and no one is pretending that wages should be growing at the pace of inflation. But we are seeing wages growth. We are seeing wages growth. When we look at what happened to you, 2.2% a year under the previous government, and we have already seen the wage case, the minimum wage case, deliver over 5%. We've seen the aged care workers, all of the low-income workers that you fought against ever getting a pay rise. Remember, your submission had the benefits of low-paid work in it. We actually want to see low-income workers get a pay rise, and that's what they'll get under this government and under the laws that we're going to pass.
Senator Cox.
Question is to Minister Wong, representing the Minister for Climate Change. This government went to COP27 telling the world that they are back, which begs the question, back from where exactly? This government has refused to commit to phasing out fossil fuels and continues to give billions of dollars to fossil fuel companies. And today, like every other day, people in this place have the opportunities to stop billions of dollars being given to fossil fuel companies, particularly on First Nations lands, to stop the destruction of land and sea country. My question is, when will this government actually commit to the global call to action by stopping public money to fossil fuel companies?
Minister.
Thank you, President, and thank you to the senator for her question. And she started her question by asking, from where are we back? We're back from the position, the illogical, irrational, ideological position that was held by those opposite for so many years. After we lost government, as people will know, there was no action at home when it comes to certainty to the energy markets, and there was a very clear view about how to behave internationally, which I do not believe is shared by most Australians, and certainly not shared by this side of the chamber, including the Greens. Now, you asked about being back. I'd make the point that we were represented by two ministers at the COP, along with the Assistant Minister, Senator McAllister, as well. I'm pleased to advise the senator that our increased ambition on climate and willingness to engage as a constructive and active global leader has been warmly welcomed by the international community, including the Pacific. We played a constructive leadership role at the COP, and we have made, as you know,
Senator
climate
Wong,
change a
Senator
priority.
Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Cox.
Point of relevance. My question was, when will this government commit to the global action, call for action on public money to fossil fuel companies?
Thank you, Senator Cox. And there was also a very long preamble, and the minister is entitled to answer those parts of the question as well. Minister.
Thank you. And I understand, Senator, that the international narrative sometimes doesn't fit your domestic political objectives, but it doesn't. It doesn't. So I want to tell you what Palau said. Palau said, a member of the Pacific family singled out Australia for our help in delivering the Loss and Damage Fund, saying that the tireless work by Australia and others reinforced our belief in multilateralism and our unwavering belief that we can solve global problems only by listening to each other and by working together. So this is Palau speaking. And so I understand you want to put a particular position because of your domestic political agenda. You know, we're actually interested in being part of the solution internationally. And I'll come back and talk to you about what Alok Sharma said at the COP as well, because I think it's instructive and it's useful to understand how far out of touch those opposite were.
The question has expired. Senator Cox, first supplementary.
Yesterday, an agreement was reached in the final text at COP27 regarding the Loss and Damage Climate Fund, which will provide monetary support for countries hit hardest by the climate disasters caused by fossil fuels. Will the government commit to providing its fair share to the Loss and Damage Fund, particularly those here in Australia, but also the developing nations, especially our Pacific neighbours?
Thank you, Senator Cox. Senator Wong.
Thank you. I'll respond to loss and damage first, and I might also give the senator perhaps the benefit of hearing what the Glasgow COP26 President Alok Sharma said. As I said in my primary answer, Australia did help deliver the Loss and Damage Fund. As Palau said, we contributed to others and reinforced—
Order.
Wow.
Order.
You really— you just—
Minister, please continue.
It's just— I mean, it's hard to know where to start, isn't it? When we have the Pacific saying to us that they appreciate that we have contributed to the Loss and Damage Fund becoming a reality in the multilateral system. We understand, of course, that loss and damage is about developed countries helping developing countries deal with the impacts of climate change. It's obviously not about reparations or compensation. And obviously, we contributed respectfully
Thank you, Minister.
to the architecture.
Senator Cox, second supplementary.
This government has committed to co-hosting COP31 in 2026 with Pacific nations, and Vanuatu's climate change minister said their support will be conditional on no public money being given to fossil fuel projects. Will this government respect Vanuatu's position, and if so, what is the timeline for meeting this request?
Thank you, Senator Cox. Minister.
I know Minister Regan Vanu and I respect him. I would make the point that that is not a demand that has been publicly made nor even privately made to me in the discussions with many Pacific Islands around the Conference of the Parties that we want to co-host. We understand the position that the minister and other Pacific Island nations have put forward. We understand that they have seen Australia over and over again, over years, take a position on climate which did not reflect the reality of their lives. But we want to work with them and we want to elevate their voices. We want to elevate the real experience, lived experience of Pacific Island nations, because they have a powerful voice when it comes to climate, and so should they. As Alok Sharma told a Pacific gathering, we now have in Australia a government that is back on the front line of the fight against climate change, and I'd like us to cheer that now. We're very grateful for that support.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Payman.
My question is to the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Senator Wong. Professor Sean Turnell arrived back in Australia on Friday after 650 days in a Myanmar prison. What efforts were made to secure Professor Turnell's release?
Thank you, Senator Payman. Minister.
Thank you. Our senators will have seen, and I'm sure all of us welcome, that Professor Sean Turnell has arrived safely back here in Australia and has been reunited with his wife Havu and family after more than 21 months of unjust detention in Myanmar. And his return will be an enormous relief to family, friends and supporters of his across Australia and across the region. There have been enormous efforts across the Australian government to secure Professor Turnell's release, and we will continue to provide whatever consular support he and his family require. can I at the outset particularly acknowledge the tireless work of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. This outcome was the result of sustained strategic engagement and diplomacy by the government and by the department. DFAT officials in Canberra and across many posts in our region played a critical role in bringing Professor Turnell home. And I particularly want to acknowledge the work of our head of mission, Angela Corcoran, her predecessor, Andrea Faulkner, as well as all of the Australian and locally engaged teams at posts. Amongst their many duties, they delivered support packages to Professor Turnell in satchels with the Australian coat of arms, which, as he described to both the Prime Minister and I in our separate calls with him, he proudly displayed in his cell. As he said to me last week, his line was, "Don't mess with the emu and the kangaroo." I also wish to thank DFAT's Consular Operations team, led by Ian Gerard, for their extraordinary dedication and focus, and for their commitment and sensitivity to keeping Professor Turnell's family updated throughout the period of his detention. One of the finest accolades that anyone could give was given by Professor Turnell, who told me, due to the work of DFAT and others, he never felt alone. I commend DFAT and all those who had a role in this extraordinary result.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Payman, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. What role did Australia's partners in our region play to help achieve the release of Professor Turnell?
Minister.
Thank you. And whilst the efforts to free Professor Turnell were led by the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, there are many others around our region who played a crucial role in advocating for his release. So I thank in this place all those who have advocated for his release, including regional partners and especially members of ASEAN. I particularly want to acknowledge Cambodia and Brunei Darussalam, the ASEAN chairs over the term of his detention. I know that Senator Payne also engaged with them, and the Special Envoy of the ASEAN chair on Myanmar. I acknowledge the roles of our friends outside of ASEAN who advocated on our behalf. They include India, Japan, the UK and the United States. We appreciate the arrangements that were made by Myanmar authorities for Professor Turnell's release. We welcome also the news of the release of other prisoners alongside Professor Turnell, including Myanmar citizen holders and also foreign nationals from the United Kingdom, US and Japan.
Senator Payman, second supplementary.
Can the minister outline to the Senate how the Albanese government will continue to support the people of Myanmar?
Minister.
Thank you, Senator Payman. Well, I think we all remain deeply concerned about the deteriorating security and humanitarian situation in Myanmar. We continue to condemn the regime's brutal behaviour at every opportunity, including in our regional and international advocacy. We will continue to advocate for the release of the remaining political prisoners, including Daw Aung San Suu Kyi. We will continue to speak up for human rights in our region, and that means we will continue to engage with those who do not agree with us. As I did decide to directly engage with the Myanmar military regime in order to seek to secure Professor Turnell's release. I did so not because we agree with them, but because we have to deal with the world as it is, but seek to shape it for the better. That is why this government will continue to support the humanitarian response in Myanmar and Bangladesh, including $135 million this financial year to assist with the delivery of life-saving food, water, shelter and other essential
for this question has expired. Senator Roberts.
My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Gallagher. It has been 4 weeks since the Australian Bureau of Statistics published data showing a 67% reduction in Australia's monthly birth rate between July and December 2021 as compared to the long-term average, a startling decrease. I drew attention to this data during Senate estimates, hoping for some reassurance. None was forthcoming. So let me ask again, Minister, why has Australia's birth rate declined from June 30th, 2021 to December 31st, 2021, revealing a 70% reduction?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Roberts for the question, and I recall the discussion that we had at estimates and the fact that certainly we requested from Senator Roberts some time to go through the information that he tabled in that hearing. I haven't got that information back, but I think the advice given by the Chief Health Officer, who I was sitting next to, or Chief Medical Officer, and myself, was that the data that you were using didn't align with information that we had, that we hadn't seen a drop-off of that size. That would be quite noticeable. And in fact, that financial year of reporting, which incorporated births, was actually the strongest birth record achieved so far, that we'd seen more births during that period of time. So, but I do think we have to come back to you, because you tabled some documents in that meeting. The Department of Health took them away, and if there's anything further I can advise you, I will do so.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Roberts, first supplementary.
Thank you. Minister, that's not as I remember it, but we'll wait for your response to come back. Is there any systematic information sharing between the Australian Bureau of Statistics and Department of Health to keep an eye on key indicators reflecting on our COVID measures, or does the Australian Bureau of Statistics just publish critical data like this in due course and hope that somebody notices at some time?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister.
Well, the ABS, thanks, President. I thank Senator Roberts for the question. ABS does work alongside other departments very closely with the data they are collecting, and keeps an eye on tracking any significant changes. So if the ABS saw something in their data that would concern them, which I would imagine the numbers that you're citing about declines in birth numbers in 1 month would raise attention, would be dealt with across government. Certainly the ABS is looking at, I think ABS in their cause of death publication did report that there had been 15 deaths due to the COVID-19 vaccine in 2021. And that was against vaccinations of 42.5 million vaccines administered in that year.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Roberts, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, what specifically is the government doing to get to the bottom of this staggering decline in births?
Minister.
Thank you. Well, the first thing, and I remember this quite clearly from estimates, was that we undertook to have a look at the information that you had tabled in that hearing and align that with some of the data that the APS was actually collecting. They collect their births and deaths data as soon as they are available, based on data from the state and territory registries of births, deaths and marriages. But I think from the first thing we need to do is get to the bottom of the numbers that you had provided, and just make sure that the data that we got from the ABS, certainly that I saw in that hearing, didn't align with those numbers that you had tabled.
Thank you, Minister. Senator McDonald.
My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations, Minister Watt. The mining industry has told the government that tens of thousands of jobs are at risk due to Labor's IR legislation and Mining Tax 2.0 thought bubble. Minister, will you admit that 33,000 jobs could be lost due to Labor's latest proposals?
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. And again, I note that the Shadow Minister for IR has been banned from asking questions about IR issues, and that can only be because, of course, that everyone remembers the work that Senator Cash did as the IR Minister, where she inflicted conflict and low wages on the Australian public. But I'm, of course, happy to hear those questions. I'm happy to take questions from Senator McDonald, who I know does have a genuine interest in the resources industry. I completely reject the claims being made by some employer groups that the government's industrial relations plans will cost the sort of job numbers that are being thrown around. In fact, one of the reasons the government is pursuing these IR changes is because they offer the opportunity to deliver a win-win to both employers and to employees. This, under the former government and the policies that they pursued, we had persistently low productivity, in inflicting a conflict-based system on employers and employees, and at the same time they, of course, delivered some of the lowest wage growth that our country has seen on record. We can have every confidence that as a result of the government's IR changes, should the Senate pass them, and I sincerely hope they do, that employers will win through higher productivity, and that includes mining employers, and that workers will win through getting the pay rise that they have been denied by the former government for far too long. The kind of claims that we're seeing being made by some groups in the community, backed in by the coalition, are not based on fact. They are not based on the experience of every other country around the world that has pursued the kind of changes that our government is pursuing. Our changes are about driving up productivity and giving workers the pay rise that they finally deserve after waiting so long.
Thank you, Minister Watt. Senator McDonald, first supplementary.
The mining industry has told the government that $77 billion of resources projects are now at risk due to Labor's irresponsible IR legislation and Mining Tax 2.0 thought bubble. Minister, how many of the 140 projects in the pipeline will not go ahead due to Labor's latest proposals?
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you again, Senator McDonald. Again, the sort of figures— I respect the fact that the mining industry and other employer groups are out there at the moment running a political campaign against what our government is trying to do. They have every right to do so, but they also have a responsibility to put facts on the table rather than put facts and figures out there that have no basis in reality. Anyone who has any contact with the resources industry at the moment, and I'm sure Senator McDonald does in her shadow capacity, and I certainly do as a Queensland-based minister, knows that the resources sector is incredibly excited about the opportunities that exist for investment in a range of commodities. Of course, critical minerals, massive opportunities in that front, particularly in the north of our country. In some of the more traditional minerals as well, there are massive opportunities there as well. And I have every expectation that while ever commodity prices remain high, as they currently are, the mining industry will invest in those projects so that they can generate those profits.
Thank you, Minister. Senator McDonald, second supplementary.
With $100 million budget cuts to critical minerals funding, irresponsible IR legislation, a Mining Tax 2.0 thought bubble, can the minister confirm how many of the 46 critical minerals projects currently in the pipeline will not proceed under Labor?
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Minister.
Well, I'm not the minister representing the Minister for Resources, so I'm happy to come back with a specific answer, or perhaps Senator Farrell, as the minister representing the Minister for Resources, is better prepared to answer a question of that nature. But again, this government— our position on critical minerals has been clear for some time. We have been the ones out there for the last 10 years, while you guys have been arguing amongst yourselves about whether climate change is real and whether we should have renewable energy. We've been the ones actually calling for the kind of investment in critical minerals that will allow those kind of developments to occur. So please don't give us some lecture about critical minerals and who wants to actually bring on the kind of transition towards renewable energy and batteries and all the kind of things that critical minerals involve. Our government has been backing that ever since we were elected, and we were backing it a hell of a lot earlier than that.
Thank you, Senator Watt. Senator Shoebridge. Order. Order. I just called Senator Shoebridge and he couldn't hear it because of the noise in the chamber.
Thank you, President. President, my question is directed to the Honourable Penny Wong, representing the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. Minister, communities across the west of New South Wales are experiencing record floods, with lives lost, property destroyed and towns in shock after an already devastating 12 months, with major flooding affecting the Lachlan, Murray, Murrumbidgee rivers, amongst others. Residents in Forbes, Condobolin, Deniliquin, Eugowra, Walgett, Collarenebri, town after town are being subject to major floods. Minister, do you accept that these major flooding events are being driven by and exacerbated by climate change?
Thank you, Senator Shoebridge. Minister.
Thank you, President. Well, Senator Shoebridge, I think I'm on the record for many years in accepting that there— actually since I was Climate Minister in 2007 and in the 2007 campaign, where we campaigned for an emissions trading scheme, which you also supported at the time. I've been on the record for many years, well over a decade, which shows you I've been here a fair while, in accepting the scientific advice about the consequence of climate change. I recall reading a CSIRO report many years ago in the last decade which forecast that unmitigated climate change would see the Goyder line move south of Clare. For those of us who are from South Australia and understand what that means, it was horrifying. That is what has informed, in part, my commitment and our government's commitment, certainly in government last time, to implement an ambitious emissions trading scheme, which I realise you weren't there, but your party voted with the coalition against. That's right. That's why in government we delivered a climate scheme when the Greens did decide to vote for it. Perhaps not quite as ambitious, but important nevertheless. And that is why for 9 years we, in opposition, have argued each election, notwithstanding the challenge of that, for a clear, credible, ambitious position on climate. And I am very pleased that after years of irrationality that the Australian community has returned not only a government—
Thank you, Senator Wong. Senator Shoebridge, I have already drawn to your attention you do not start saying point of order the minute you stand. You wait, I give you the call, and then you tell me what the issue is. So, Senator Shoebridge.
It's relevance. We're a minute and a half into the answer on floods and the terrible floods that are happening now, and the minister has not once addressed them.
Thank you, Senator Shoebridge. Order. 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 I have the minister on her feet. Minister, please go ahead.
Thank
I'll
you.
remind you the question was about the floods.
Yes, and as I said at the outset, I'm sorry if the senator needs me to repeat it, but I am on the record for over a decade. Wow. Would you like to speak, Senator Whish-Wilson? I notice you always want to interject. Would you like to? You go right ahead, mate.
Senator Whish-Wilson.
I did get an invitation.
Senator Whish-Wilson, do you have a point of order? No, thank you. Minister Wong.
He's always so keen to interject, particularly on some people, that we'll give you leave, mate, if that's what you want. Senator Shoebridge, I'm sorry, I was actually genuinely trying to answer your question. I have always accepted the scientific advice about the consequences of climate change. I also recognise, and this is where our parties do differ, that you need to actually have policies to meet a target and recognise that ensuring that you meet a target of reductions in emissions—
Thank you, Minister. Your time
is a
has
tough
expired.
policy.
Senator Shoebridge, first supplementary.
Minister, when Brisbane was devastated by flooding in 2011, we all had to pay to clean it up through a flood recovery levy. Now we're making our children pay through increased government debt, and all the while coal and gas companies are still making billions, and fossil fuel subsidies of a staggering $11.6 billion a year. Why won't your government make coal and gas companies pay for disaster preparedness and to rebuild and support these devastating communities, since they created the problem in the first place?
Thank you, Senator Shoebridge. Minister.
Well, the problem— I appreciate that the political object of that question is to try and suggest that only one part of the economy has responsibility, only one sector in society has responsibility. The reality is this is a whole of economy, a whole of society response. It is a whole of economy and a whole of society response. And we'll be able to deal with it if we deal with it together. But if all we do is point the finger at different parts of our society or different parts of our economy, we will never get that. The hard reality is this country has prospered greatly. We have all prospered greatly, including with the education system that has been funded through government revenue from the exports that we have made over decades. And now what we have to do is transition our economy over time to a world that will be a net-zero emission world. That is a big challenge, and it's not one that's achieved by pointing the finger.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Shoebridge, second supplementary.
Minister, many Australians are pleased to hear the change in rhetoric on climate. Myself, I'm pleased to hear that change in rhetoric on climate, some of which you've repeated here. But how is that rhetoric going to protect us from the carbon emissions of the coal and gas projects that your government keeps continuing to support? And how are you going to answer that to the people in Western New South Wales who have climate-induced flooding right now?
Thank you, Senator Shoebridge. Minister.
Well, what we will do is do what we said we would do before the election, and that is to put this economy, which is a highly carbon-intensive economy, onto an ambitious 2030 target of 43% reduction and a 2050 target of net zero. And what we will do in government is not simply do rhetoric, but actually do policy which delivers it, because that is the key. We actually have to change the direction in which our economy, along with the global economy, is heading. And no amount of, as I said, blaming others and looking to the past and pointing the finger is going to actually achieve what is an ambitious transformation of our domestic economy and the global economy. I wish that the world at Copenhagen had done more. I really do. It was one of the saddest moments I've ever been involved with in politics, for the reasons to which you avert.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Thank you, Minister. Senator Grogan.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations, Minister Watt. The government intends to reform Australia's workplace relations laws to get wages moving. Can you outline for us what the changes are and why they are necessary, and what the urgency is?
Thank you, Senator Grogan. Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Grogan, and I know that you have a very long record in standing up for the interests of workers, and it's great to see you continue that work since you've been here in the Senate. The Secure Jobs Better Pay Bill delivers on the Albanese government's commitment to a fairer workplace relations system which provides Australians with job security, gender equality and sustainable wage growth. For nearly 10 years, wages were kept low by the Coalition as a deliberate design feature of their management of the economy. None of us will ever forget that infamous interview with former Senator Matthias Cormann, where he belled the cat on the economic policy of this government and its desire to keep wages low. In contrast, the Albanese Labor government is taking action to improve workplace conditions, wages and job security by implementing our election commitments and outcomes from the Jobs and Skills Summit, which brought employers, unions and the community together in a way we had never seen under the former government. The truth is that the current workplace relations system is not working well for workers or employers, and it's not fit to meet our economy's current challenges. In particular, the bargaining system is broken, and we've all heard over recent weeks, Senator Cash in particular, but other members of the opposition say that what we're proposing to do is terrible, it'll make the sky fall in, it'll have all these kind of consequences. The one thing I can guarantee you is that if we don't make changes to Australia's bargaining system, if we do persist with the regime that was in place under the Coalition, we can guarantee the same outcome, which is low wages and low productivity well into the future. The current system, presided over by the Coalition, is not delivering the fairness, gender equality or economic growth that Australia needs and that Australian workers deserve. The bill aims to tackle insecure work, gender inequality and flatlining wages. And as for why this bill is urgent, Australian workers have waited long enough. They've been waiting a very long time for a decent pay rise, for wages to keep up with the cost of living and to help them with the cost of living, and we're going to do something about it.
Senator Grogan, first supplementary.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister Watt. That was very useful. You referenced the Jobs and Skills Summit, which I was honoured to attend. Since that time, we've seen many scare campaigns, which I've been quite surprised about, regarding these new proposed laws. Could you please outline for us where the errors are in these scare campaigns?
Minister.
Thank you, Senator Grogan. And I'm not surprised that Senator Cash is feeling a bit sensitive about scare campaigns, because most of them have come from her. But here's a few facts for Senator Cash. And Minister Burke took the National Press Club through this the other day, but in case Senator Cash missed it, I'm here to repeat them. The first scare campaign that we've been hearing from the opposition is that this bill will produce coast-to-coast strikes. In actual fact, the bill makes industrial action harder with an additional requirement for mandatory conciliation before industrial action can be taken. Ballots need to be agreed on by an employer basis as per the current
Senator
rules.
Watt.
And don't they react?
Senator Watt, please resume your seat. I'll just wait until there's quiet. Thank you, Senator McKenzie. Minister.
And Don't they react when the first of their scare campaigns get called out? But you know what? I've got about 4 more to go through. Their second scare campaign is about pattern bargaining. But in actual fact, the restrictions on taking industrial action when the bargaining representative is engaging in pattern bargaining are already in the Fair Work Act. And they are not changing, not a word, not even a comma. So, in fact, what we're hearing from the opposition is a scare campaign about their own policy,
Minister.
and I've got 3 more.
The time has expired. Senator Grogan, second supplementary.
Senator Watt, I wonder if you would be able to— Minister Watt, I wonder if you'd be able to step out for us the difference in the workplace laws from previous approaches, because I think it may be very beneficial for those in this chamber to hear the detail of that.
Thank you, Senator Grogan. Minister Watt.
I would be delighted, Senator Grogan, to point out how our plans for workplace laws differ from those that we've seen previously, because the contrast between the Albanese Labor government's approach and the coalition's when it comes to workplace laws could not be starker. On the one hand, we have Labor wanting to get wages moving again. On the other hand, we have the coalition for whom low wages was a deliberate design feature of the economy. Under Labor, you have higher productivity for businesses. Under the coalition, you have lower productivity. Under Labor, you have more agreements, a workplace relations law system that encourages more agreements. Under the coalition, you hear exactly what we're hearing over there, which is more conflict. They are addicted to conflict in the workplace and they want to hang on to it. We actually want to bring in more agreements between employers and employees. For the coalition, it is never the right time for a pay rise. For years they told us that low unemployment would deliver pay rises. We now have unemployment and we're not getting the pay rises going on with it. We saw Senator Birmingham on Insiders yesterday mumbling and fumbling his way through the answer to the question about how you get wage rises moving.
Expired. Senator Chandler.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Over the last 3 months, the Iranian regime has been accused of killing more than 300 civilians standing up for human rights, particularly Iranian women and girls. When the Prime Minister was asked by the opposition 2 weeks ago why sanctions had not been applied to the Iranian officials responsible for the killing of its citizens, he said that the government was considering the implications of doing so for Australian businesses. The Iranian-Australian community has been calling for weeks for the Australian government to hold the Iranian regime to account. Has the government now applied any sanctions, and if not, why not?
Thank you, Senator Chandler. Minister Wong. Minister Wong, beg your pardon.
Thank you, President. Well, the senator did canvass some of this in estimates, and I will repeat what I said to the senator on that occasion, which is there is, I think, bipartisan or multi-party condemnation of what is occurring in Iran. Which is also why the government has been very forward-leaning in its public statements of condemnation, its engagement through DFAT with the Sharjah here, and also at the UN General Assembly. And I took the senator through the interaction the government had, including the statement at the General Assembly on the human rights situation in Iran. We supported calls for a special session of the Human Rights Council to address the deteriorating human rights situation in Iran. On social media, expressed support for the Australia-New Zealand statement at the UN Security Council, highlighting our concerns about Iran's membership on the UN Commission on the Status of Women, a body that Iran joined whilst the coalition was in government. We joined Canada and New Zealand in expressing those concerns to the UN Security Council. We delivered a further statement to the UN Third Committee Interactive Dialogue. And I can go back further. I've engaged with counterparts, including Melanie Joly, as recently as last week about this issue. In relation to sanctions, as Senator Payne and Senator Bishop and Ms Bishop would have said before me, we don't engage in public speculation about sanctions, and you will understand why not. But I would encourage the senator. I understand that this is an issue that many people are concerned about. This isn't a partisan issue.
Thank you, Minister.
This is an issue we are all joining.
Senator Chandler, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Since the Prime Minister's comments, the Iranian government has used its military to fire on and kill innocent civilians, including children like 9-year-old Kian Pifalek, who died after security forces opened fire on the car he and his parents were in. When will the government do more than give lip service to the women and girls of Iran and the Iranian Australians calling for Australia to take action?
Thank you, Senator Chandler. Minister.
Look, I disagree with the lip service point. That seems to suggest the only way in which a government can express its view with the many regimes and countries with which we do not agree is by sanctions. And if that is the case, then there were almost no expression. There was almost no expression in support of human rights under the coalition, almost none. So my point is this: there are a great many states in this world, some in our region, whose actions we do not agree with. And sometimes you're right. Sometimes we look at what are the hardest form of expression of that. The UN sanctions are an example of that. The sanctions on North Korea and Russia are an example on that. But what we also should do is what Australia has been doing, which is bilaterally and multilaterally add our voice in condemnation of what is occurring in Iran.
Thank you, Minister. The time has expired. Senator Chandler, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Since the Prime Minister said Australia was still thinking about taking action, the international community, including the United States and the EU, have imposed sanctions on companies and individuals involved in the production or transfer of Iranian drones that have been used by Russia in attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure in Ukraine. When will Australia catch up to the rest of the international community, and when will the government use the Magnitsky-style laws passed by this parliament for the express purpose of holding to account those responsible for the most egregious human rights abuses?
Thank you, Senator Chandler. Minister.
I think that. Thank the senator for her question. We actually implement the full suite of UN Security Council mandated sanctions on Iran, an autonomous sanction regime to prohibit the transfer of conventional arms to Iran. In fact, it's on this basis that we have imposed previously, and I acknowledge this is, I think, was Ms Bishop from memory, but it may also have been Senator Payne who continued them, targeted sanctions on Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a whole and a number of IRGC, Iran Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps linked officials, financial and travel entities, which I think may have been imposed by Senator Payne. In relation to the provision of armed drones and missiles, that is a deeply concerning report. We condemn any arms transfers to Russia to support its illegal aggression against Ukraine, and we call upon all countries to refrain from supporting Russia.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister for Trade and Tourism, Senator Farrell. Could the Minister outline the government's approach to trade policy?
Thank you, Senator Polley. Minister.
Thank you. And, yes, I can, Senator Polley, and thank you for the wonderful job you do on the behalf of the people of Tasmania. And I know you know all of the benefits that come to Tasmania from free trade. And open trade is a net positive for Australia. Recent analysis show that 1 in 4 jobs is related to trade in this country, and many of them in Tasmania, I might add. And jobs in export industries pay 5% above the national average income. As outlined in my speech on the 14th of November to the APEC Study Centre in Melbourne, there are 4 principles guiding Australia's approach to international trade and investment under this government. The first principle is that to meet the challenges of our time, we need to deepen and diversify our trading relationships. Placing all your trade eggs in the one basket has proved bad economic strategy. Secondly, Australia is working collaboratively with like-minded partners to support an open, rules-based, multi-trading system that works in Australia's interests. And thirdly, we're investing in ourselves, using industry policy to ensure Australia's exports are more complex, of higher value and more sophisticated. And finally, the fourth principle is that trade must be a driver of inclusive economic growth and greater economic well-being for all Australians. More trade, not less, is a key part of how we build an economic future that we want in Australia, a future of secure,
Thank you,
high-paying
Minister. Your time
jobs.
has expired. Senator Polley, first supplementary.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Thank you for that informative answer, Minister. How will the new free trade agreements support the government's trade policy agenda?
Minister.
Thank you, Senator, for that other question, and thank you, President, for the opportunity to answer a terrific question. A key plank of our trade policy agenda is trade diversification. This means helping Australian businesses grow and develop new markets for their exports and to find new and deeper sources of investment. Today, our government is delivering this commitment by debating legislation in the House of Representatives, which will bring the Australia-UK Free Trade Agreement and the Australia-India Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement into force. The India Free Trade Agreement will eliminate tariffs on 90% of Australia's exports to India. The Australia-UK Free Trade Agreement— well, you didn't do it. You had a chance to do it and you didn't do it. But we're doing the job. We're doing the job. The Australia-UK Free Trade Agreement will eliminate—
Thank you, Minister. The time has expired. Senator Polley, second supplementary.
The minister recently participated in trade negotiations to launch the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. What is the framework and how will participation support Australia's trade policy agenda, Minister?
Minister.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Senator Polley, for that. President, recently I joined ministers from 13 other partners across the Indo-Pacific in Los Angeles to launch negotiations on the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, or IPEF as it's known. IPEF members include 8 of our top 10 trading partners and key regional allies like the United States, Japan, Korea, India, Indonesia and, of course, our Pacific neighbour Fiji. The framework will cover new and emerging trade issues including supply chains, clean energy, infrastructure, tax and anti-corruption. IPEF is an important part of the Albanese Labor government's trade policy agenda that will help businesses expand and support high-paying jobs.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Wong.
Thank you. I ask that further questions be placed on notice.